In a quiet village, nestled at the edge of a sprawling forest, lived a woman named Amara. Her name carried a weight of strength, yet her heart was a well of vulnerability, a duality that was quietly reflected in her daily life. Amara wasn't the type to speak loudly or assert herself in ways that drew attention. Instead, her strength came from within, a quiet resilience forged through years of hardship and small victories, of love given and lost, and of the endless toil of daily survival. She spent her mornings by the river, watching the soft ripples glide across the surface, the sunlight dancing upon the water as if to remind her that beauty could be found even in the simplest of things. The river, like her emotions, ran deep. Beneath the surface, there were currents and eddies, but on most days, it appeared calm, reflecting the sky and the trees that lined its banks. Amara would sit on a worn, flat stone by the water's edge, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing patterns in the sand. It was her moment of peace before the world demanded her attention once again. The village itself was quiet, not in a way that felt desolate, but in a way that suggested life moved at a gentler pace here. Children played in the distance, their laughter carried by the breeze, and the soft murmur of the villagers going about their day filled the air. The villagers knew Amara well, or at least they thought they did. To them, she was a widow, a mother, and a skilled cook whose meals brought warmth and nourishment to many. But beneath the surface, in the privacy of her thoughts, Amara harbored a deeper struggle, one she shared with no one, not even her children. Amara's days followed a predictable rhythm. After her quiet mornings by the river, she would return home to tend to her children and prepare the meals that sustained their modest household. Her hands were worn from years of kneading dough, chopping vegetables, and stirring pots, but she never complained. These small acts of care had become her way of showing love, even though there were times when her heart ached with the weight of an unspeakable loss. Her husband, Kwame, had been gone for years, and yet his absence still lingered in every corner of their small home, in the silence that followed the laughter of her children, and in the meals she prepared alone. Kwame had been a kind man, gentle with their children and full of life, but his death had left a void that Amara could never quite fill. She never spoke of the details, and the villagers never asked. They assumed he had fallen ill or met with an accident, and perhaps that was what Amara allowed them to believe. It was easier that way. She had learned to carry her grief in silence, burying it beneath the surface where no one could see, much like the river that appeared so calm and still on the outside. Her children were her only solace now, though even they, in their innocence, could not fully comprehend the depth of their mother's pain. They loved her, of course, and she loved them fiercely in return, but there were moments when she felt like a ghost in her own home, drifting through the motions of life without truly living. The meals she cooked, the clothes she washed, the stories she told at bedtime, all of these acts had become rituals, ways to pass the time, ways to fill the silence that had settled in the years since Kwame's death. As the sun began to set each day, casting a golden hue over the village, Amara would often stand at the threshold of her home, gazing out at the horizon. There was a sense of longing in her eyes, a quiet yearning for something she could not name. Perhaps it was for peace, or perhaps it was simply for a moment of clarity, a brief reprieve from the weight she carried. But whatever it was, it remained just out of reach, like the distant horizon that stretched before her, always there but never quite attainable. Her neighbors would pass by, offering friendly waves or a brief word of conversation, but Amara remained distant, polite but detached. She had learned long ago that it was easier to keep her heart guarded, to keep her thoughts to herself. The world outside her home could be kind, but it could also be cruel, and Amara had no desire to expose herself to its unpredictability. She had built a fortress around her emotions, one that even her children could not fully breach. And yet, despite this quiet isolation, there were moments of joy in Amara's life. The laughter of her children as they played in the yard, the warmth of the fire as she cooked their evening meal, the soft sound of their breathing as they slept, these were the small joys that sustained her, the moments that reminded her that life, though difficult, was still worth living. She found comfort in these simple things, even as she continued to carry the burden of her past in silence. The villagers often remarked on Amara's strength, her ability to carry on despite the hardships she had faced. But what they didn't know was that her strength came not from an absence of pain, but from her ability to endure it, to carry it with her each day without letting it consume her. It was a quiet strength, one that was born not from heroism or bravery, but from the simple act of surviving, of continuing to live even when the world had taken so much from her. Amara knew that the peace she sought would not come easily. It was something she would have to find within herself, in the quiet moments by the river, in the rhythm of her daily tasks, and in the love she gave to her children. It was a journey she had been on for years, one that had no clear destination, but she was determined to see it through, even if it meant walking the path alone. And so, each day, Amara continued her quiet existence, her heart a well of unspoken emotions, her mind filled with thoughts she dared not share. But beneath the surface, something was stirring, something deeper and more profound than even she realized. The story of Amara's life was far from over, and though the villagers may have thought they knew her, there was much about her that remained hidden, waiting to be revealed. As the story moves forward, the peaceful rhythm of Adama's life begins to reveal subtle cracks, small fissures that hint at something beneath the surface. The conflict, at first glance, is not loud or dramatic, but it is quietly brewing inside her. There's a tension that she carries within her heart, a weight that grows heavier with each passing day. Adama sits by the river each morning, watching the gentle flow of water, but her thoughts are anything but calm. The river, once a place of solace, now mirrors her inner turmoil. She reflects on her marriage to Abioi, a man she once deeply loved, but who, in recent years, has grown distant. It's not the distance of absence, but the kind that slowly settles in the heart, a growing chasm of silence and unspoken words. They no longer laugh as they once did. Their conversations have become transactional, focused on the needs of the family, the daily tasks, and nothing more. This unspoken estrangement gnaws at her, though she buries it under the routine of life. Adama's children, young and innocent, continue to be her source of joy, but even in their presence, she finds herself distracted. Her youngest son asks her for a story, but her mind is elsewhere. The simple request, once an opportunity to bond, now feels like a burden. She can't help but wonder how she came to this place of quiet resignation. Her internal struggle isn't one of anger, but of sadness. Adama longs for connection, for a return to the closeness she once felt with her husband. Yet, she is unsure how to bridge the growing gap between them. When she tries to initiate conversation, to bring up the subtle changes she feels, Abioi dismisses her concerns. His responses are curt, almost indifferent, leaving Adama feeling more isolated. His unwillingness to engage emotionally is a wound that deepens with every interaction. There's another source of tension, though Adama rarely speaks of it. Her role within the family, while essential, feels increasingly confined. She loves her children, her home, and the life they've built together, but there is a quiet yearning within her for something more. She doesn't know what that more is, but the feeling lingers like a whisper she can't quite grasp. Perhaps it is the desire to be seen, truly seen, by those she loves. Perhaps it is the need for her own voice in a household where her role is always one of support, care, and quiet strength. This internal conflict becomes harder to suppress. Adama's thoughts grow louder when she lies in bed at night, next to her husband who is already asleep. The silence of their shared space, once a comfort, now feels oppressive. She turns over memories in her mind, of their younger years, when Abioi would reach for her hand in the dark, or whisper sweet nothings that made her smile. But now, there is only the soft sound of his breath, and the distance between them, both physical and emotional. Adama's frustration also extends to herself. She feels guilty for wanting more. She tells herself that she should be grateful, she has a loving family, a home, a life that many would envy. But the guilt doesn't erase the longing. It only adds to the burden she carries in silence. The tension builds quietly over time, with no clear release. Adama finds herself becoming irritable, short-tempered with the children over small things that never used to bother her. She knows this isn't who she wants to be, but she doesn't know how to break free from the cycle. Each small outburst is followed by regret, as she watches the confused expressions on her children's faces, wondering why their mother, usually so patient, has become so easily rattled. Even the village seems to sense that something is amiss. Adama has always been respected for her calm demeanor, her wisdom, and her gentle leadership within the community. But lately, there are murmurs, subtle comments about how she seems different or distant. She brushes them off with a forced smile, but inside, the words linger. It's as if the people around her can see the cracks in her armor before she's fully acknowledged them herself. One evening, after another tense interaction with Abioi, Adama sits outside their small home, staring at the darkening sky. The stars are beginning to appear, one by one, but the beauty of the night does little to soothe her troubled mind. She feels the weight of her internal struggle pressing down on her, and she's unsure how much longer she can carry it. The quiet tension, once manageable, has grown to the point where it threatens to spill over. In this slow build of conflict, there is no shouting or dramatic confrontation. The tension lies in what is unsaid, in the way Adama and Abioi move around each other like ghosts of their former selves, in the way Adama questions her own desires and struggles with the guilt of wanting more. It's the kind of conflict that simmers beneath the surface, invisible to the outside world, but all-consuming within. Adama's thoughts return to the river, where the water flows so effortlessly, following its path without resistance. She wishes her life could be more like that, fluid, simple, without the weight of these internal battles. But life, she realizes, is far more complicated. The river may appear calm on the surface, but beneath it, currents shift and collide, just as her emotions do now. The tension in Adama's life continues to build, not with dramatic gestures, but with each small moment of disconnect, each quiet realization that her inner world is no longer in harmony with the life she is living. Something must change, but she doesn't yet know what that change will be. For now, she can only sit with her thoughts, feeling the quiet storm gathering strength within her. As the story unfolds, Adama's past gradually surfaces, revealing the layers that have shaped her into the woman she is today. These revelations come not through dramatic flashbacks or sudden confessions, but through quiet moments of introspection and small, meaningful conversations. Her history is filled with emotional nuance, a tapestry of experiences that shaped her in ways that may not be immediately visible to those around her. One morning, as Adama goes about her daily chores, she catches sight of an old woven basket in the corner of the room, gathering dust. It's a simple object, but it stirs a memory from long ago. She stops, her hands hovering above her work, as her mind drifts back to her youth. She remembers the day her mother handed her that very basket, just before she left their village to marry Abioi. Her mother, always practical and firm, had given her little in the way of advice, but Adama recalled her final words, "You'll make a good home, Adama. Just like I did." At the time, those words had felt like a blessing, but now, they echoed in her mind with a weight she hadn't felt before. Adama's relationship with her mother had always been one of quiet respect, but there was a distance between them, a gap that was never fully bridged. Her mother had been a woman of duty, someone who believed in sacrifice for the sake of the family, and Adama had inherited that same sense of responsibility. But now, as she reflects on her own life, she wonders if that same belief had also led her down a path of silent suffering. Like her mother, she had devoted herself to her husband, her children, her home, but in the process, had she lost a part of herself? These thoughts linger with Adama as she goes about her day, subtly altering her mood. In the evening, after putting the children to bed, she sits beside the fire, lost in her thoughts. Abioi joins her, and for a brief moment, they share the same space, but they are worlds apart. He doesn't notice the distant look in her eyes, the weight of memories pulling her inward. Later, when her eldest daughter, Zuri, sits beside her, Adama is pulled back into the present. Zoe is at the age where she is beginning to ask more questions, curious about life, about the world, and about her mother's past. One evening, as they sit together under the stars, Zuri asks quietly, "Mama, were you happy when you married Baba?" The question catches Adama off guard. She isn't sure how to answer. She had been young when she married a boy, barely more than a girl herself. At the time, marriage had seemed like the natural next step, something expected of her. Happiness wasn't something she had considered, it had simply been what was done. I didn't think about happiness then, she says after a long pause. I thought about what I needed to do, to be a good wife, a good mother. And I have tried to be that. Zuri listens intently, her eyes wide with the innocence of youth. But Mama, she asks, do you think you were happy? Adama looks at her daughter, so full of life and curiosity, and for the first time in a long while, she feels a twinge of something, regret, perhaps, or maybe just the weight of all the years that have passed. I think I was content, she says, choosing her words carefully. But happiness, it's a different thing. As Zuri nods thoughtfully, Adama realizes how much she wants her daughter to have a different life, a life where happiness is not an afterthought, but something to be sought after and cherished. She doesn't want Zuri to carry the same quiet burdens that she has carried all these years. These conversations with her daughter stir something within Adama, a desire to reflect more deeply on the choices she made in her youth. She remembers her first love, before a boy named Malik. They were young and foolish, and their relationship had been fleeting, but it had left a lasting impression on her heart. Malik had been different, he had dreamed of adventure, of seeing the world beyond the village. He had spoken to Adama of things that, at the time, had seemed impossible, but his words had ignited a fire in her, a fire that was quickly extinguished when her family arranged her marriage to a boy. For years, she had buried the memory of Malik, convincing herself that it was a childish infatuation, something that couldn't have lasted. And yet, as she grows older, she realizes that it wasn't Malik she missed, but the version of herself she had been with him. With Malik, she had felt free, unburdened by the expectations of family and duty. With him, she had allowed herself to dream, to imagine a life that wasn't defined by sacrifice. This realization is bittersweet for Adama. She knows she cannot change the past, and she does not regret her life with Abayo or the family they have built together. But she cannot help but wonder what her life would have been like if she had chosen a different path. The guilt of even thinking such thoughts weighs on her, but she can't shake them. In a quiet moment, Adama shares some of these thoughts with her sister, Amina, who has always been more outspoken and bold. Amina listens without judgment, nodding knowingly. We all have those what-if moments, Amina says softly. But we can't live in them. We can only move forward with what we know now. Amina's words resonate with Adama. She realizes that while her past has shaped her, it doesn't have to define her future. She doesn't have to live in the shadow of what might have been, nor does she need to carry the burden of her mother's expectations. She can find her own way, even now, even after all these years. The subtle revelation of Adama's past is not marked by any one defining moment, but rather by a series of small, reflective insights. Through these memories and conversations, the audience begins to understand the quiet struggles that have shaped her life, her sense of duty, the love she gave up, the dreams she let go of, and the internal conflict that continues to stir within her. Her past is not one of grand tragedies, but of quiet, relatable struggles, the kind of emotional challenges that many people face in their lives. Through these revelations, the audience is invited to connect with Adama on a deeply human level. They see her not just as a wife and mother, but as a woman who has lived, loved, and lost, who continues to search for peace and fulfillment in the midst of life's quiet complexities. As the story reaches its emotional peak, Adama finds herself sitting by the riverbank, a place that has always brought her solace. The gentle flow of the water mirrors her own thoughts, constant yet soothing. The sun is low, casting a soft golden light over the landscape, creating a peaceful setting for the moment that is about to unfold. For days, Adama has been carrying the weight of her internal struggles, reflecting on her past choices, her sense of duty, and the quiet dissatisfaction that has lingered in her heart. But now, here in this tranquil moment, something begins to shift within her. There's no dramatic realization, no sudden revelation, just a gradual understanding, like the slow unfurling of a flower in the early morning light. Her mind drifts to her children, her husband, and the life she has built over the years. She has given so much of herself, often without questioning what she wanted in return. For the first time, she allows herself to think of what could be, not in terms of regrets or missed opportunities, but in terms of the small changes she can make moving forward. As she reflects, a quiet sense of acceptance washes over her. She realizes that she doesn't need to leave everything behind or make grand changes to find peace. The conflict within her was never about her family or her responsibilities. It was about allowing herself to acknowledge her own desires and needs. In this moment, Adama feels something she hasn't felt in a long time, a sense of inner calm, as if the tension she's carried for years is slowly being released. Her daughter, Nia, joins her at the riverbank, sensing that her mother is deep in thought. Without speaking, they sit together in the fading light, the silence between them filled with understanding. Nia, too, has been growing, and in this quiet moment, Adama feels a connection with her daughter that goes beyond words. It's as though they both recognize the quiet strength in one another, the strength that comes from navigating life's challenges with grace and resilience. Adama turns to Nia and, for the first time, speaks the words she has long held back. I want you to know, it's okay to choose your own path. You don't have to live the way I did. You deserve to follow your heart. Her voice is soft but steady, carrying the weight of her realization. Nia smiles gently, understanding the depth of her mother's words. I know, Mama. And so do you. In that simple exchange, Adama feels a release, a quiet, internal shift. It's not about changing her entire life, but about making space for herself, for her dreams, and for her own happiness. She finds peace in knowing that it's never too late to reclaim a part of herself, no matter how small. The story's climax is not defined by external change, but by Adama's internal realization, a gentle understanding that brings her a sense of closure, forgiveness, and inner peace. As the story begins to draw to a close, Adama's journey of self-realization gently settles into the rhythm of her daily life. The sun sets behind the horizon, and the village slowly dims into a soft twilight. The river, which had been a place of reflection, now feels like a friend that has accompanied her through her silent struggles, mirroring her inner calm. Adama moves through her home with a newfound sense of peace. There are no dramatic changes. She still tends to her duties, cares for her family, and listens to the concerns of her neighbors. But something is different. The weight she once carried has lessened, not because her responsibilities have changed, but because she has finally allowed herself the space to breathe within them. She no longer feels trapped, no longer defined solely by what she must do for others. Her quiet internal realization has transformed how she approaches life, and that shift, though small, is profound. In the days that follow, her relationships with her family subtly evolve. Her daughter, Nia, seems to sense the shift in her mother and starts opening up in new ways. Conversations between them become more meaningful, filled with quiet understanding rather than the busyness of daily tasks. There is no need for long explanations. Both mother and daughter have reached a deeper connection, one born from shared unspoken experiences and mutual respect. Adama's husband, too, notices the change in her, though it is more in her manner than in any words she speaks. She moves with a softness, a calmness that was once buried beneath the layers of duty and self-sacrifice. She still fulfills her role as a wife and mother, but now, she does so with a lightness that hadn't been there before. It's as if she has found a way to live more fully in the present moment, to appreciate the small joys without letting the burdens overwhelm her. There is no need for a grand declaration or a major upheaval. Life continues much as it always has, but with a sense of quiet growth. The lesson that emerges is not one of dramatic change, but of gentle self-awareness and acceptance. Adama has learned that forgiveness, both of herself and of the circumstances that shaped her life, is essential for inner peace. She doesn't need to look outside herself for validation or transformation. Instead, the greatest change has come from within, from her decision to honor her own feelings and desires, even as she continues to care for those around her. As the days pass, Adama also finds herself more patient with others. The tensions she once felt with her husband, her children, and her neighbors seem less significant now. She understands that everyone is carrying their own burdens, and that the conflicts and frustrations of daily life are often rooted in unspoken fears and worries. Her newfound peace allows her to extend grace and patience to those around her, and in doing so, she deepens her connections with them. One evening, as the family gathers for dinner, the atmosphere feels lighter than it has in a long time. There is laughter at the table, soft and genuine, as they share stories from the day. Adama watches her family with quiet contentment, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the life she has built. She knows now that her happiness doesn't have to come at the expense of others, that it is possible to care for her family while also nurturing herself. And so, the story concludes not with a grand resolution, but with a sense of balance. Adama has found a way to integrate her own needs with those of her family, to live a life that honors both her responsibilities and her individuality. She has learned that healing doesn't always come from external change. Sometimes, it is the quiet internal shifts that matter most. The moral of the story is gently woven into the fabric of Adama's life. It is a lesson about self-discovery, about the importance of listening to one's own heart even in the midst of caring for others. It is a lesson about patience, with oneself and with others, and about the quiet strength that comes from forgiveness and acceptance. The story leaves the audience with a feeling of calm and reflection, as though they, too, have walked alongside Adama in her journey. The lesson isn't spelled out. Instead, it lingers in the quiet moments of the narrative, allowing each viewer to take from it what resonates most deeply with them. As the evening fades, and Adama's family settles into the peaceful rhythm of the night, she steps outside one last time to sit by the river. The moon casts a gentle glow over the water, and Adama breathes in the cool night air, feeling content in a way she hasn't felt in years. Her journey isn't over, it never truly is, but she has found a moment of peace, and for now, that is enough. The story closes on this quiet, reflective note, with the audience left to absorb the emotional depth of Adama's journey. The themes of forgiveness, healing, and self-discovery resonate softly, offering a powerful but understated message about the quiet strength that comes from inner growth. In the end, it is a story about finding balance between duty and desire, between caring for others and caring for oneself, and the deep peace that can come from such understanding. With that, the story ends, allowing the audience a moment to reflect on their own lives, their own journeys, and the quiet lessons they, too, may need to embrace. As we come to the end of Adama's journey, if this story touched you in any way, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of her path resonated with you most? Feel free to share in the comments below. And if you'd like to see more stories like this, don't forget to gently tap the like button and subscribe to join us next time. Thank you for watching, and I hope this reflection stays with you long after the story ends.